your name there, Maulud?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, can you say it for me though one more time?
Mulud.
Maulud. Okay, Maulud. If you wouldn't mind changing your name from that WLI Montana Team Pro account to your actual name.
Yes, I think I have already done it. So on my screen.
Really?
Christine.
Oh, maybe there's a delay maybe for Christine. Yeah, Maulud, I know you had it, but I wanted to make sure I said your name properly too.
But Malu, what time is it over there?
Oh, now it is exactly 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Ooh.
All right.
Well, so you're in Morocco, not
Yeah.
not in Montana. Wow. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Christina. Yeah. And Ying, I'll look to you about when I should start.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready. Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, we'll this is interesting. Okay, we'll see how it goes. I have several goals for today. Let me go ahead and I'll stay here first just to say hello. Do you have it recording already, Ying, or do you want to go ahead and begin?
Yes, I have. Diane,
Oh,
do
I
you
see now.
just introduce yourself a little bit about what you do? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Diane Neubauer, or Duyanzi in my Chinese name down there. I am a non-native speaker of Chinese. I grew up in Ohio in pretty much an English-speaking family. And then I started to learn Chinese in college, eventually moved to China. And so and Chinese has been a part of my life since I was a young adult. And then I know a little French, a little bit of ASL, like ASL. I'm taking a class right now, correct? And a little Thai. So we may use a little Thai today. We'll see what you prefer when we get to that point in the workshop today. So thank you for inviting me to do this. And I wanted to say first too, thank you for being teachers and thank you for being language teachers. This has been an extraordinarily difficult period of time to be a teacher. And I really appreciate that you're doing that and that you're seeking to develop a program that's really vibrant and successful for the students in Montana. So let's see, besides that, I taught Mandarin Chinese. After I lived in China several years, I came back to the US and I taught a program where I started 5th through 8th grade levels. They then added a 4th grade exploratory program. And then I also had a little bit of early, it wasn't preschool, but there was a junior kindergartner, so he was 5, up through 2nd grade as an after school program. And that was wild. So I was new to that age category. So I have some sense of really little ones, but most of my experience has been 4th grade through adults. So right now I'm teaching online on the weekend with mostly groups of adults and some maybe adolescent teens. So right now I have an 11-year-old in a group with all adults and he's doing just fine. So yeah, so I've done a little online teaching. I've also taught in schools for 10 years. And then I shifted to doing a PhD program full time. So I've been there now, this is my 4th year, and I still have about a year and a half probably. So I'm done with classwork and I'm starting the big, huge research project. That's the dissertation this semester. So that's kind of where I am. So if I look stressed, it's that too. It's like this overwhelming, but I love it. I love it. And my goal is to work in teacher education. So opportunities like this are really fun to me. And the other thing that's nice about this is I think that a lot of the future of teacher education is going to be this kind of online format where we can do drop-in coaching and drop-in workshops when someone needs it that are tailored to the needs of the specific group. So I think it's cool that we're doing this. Today and throughout the 5 sessions, what I'm hoping to do so that we can interact and seeing that it is a small group, probably if you remain on camera, I will be using that to help me follow if you're understanding, if you need a break, if you have a question. So you can use your camera if you have it on. If you need to turn your camera off, that's fine with me. And you can always access the chat. I'm going to assume at this point, probably all of you have used Zoom. Is that right? Okay. Have you used annotation tools before? It's like where somebody would share screen or use a whiteboard and you use text boxes or draw. Looks like some, but not necessarily. Okay, we might do a little bit of that today and we'll do that again in the future. So big goals for today are just an overview. I will go ahead and share my screen now. So I'm going to share screen in a way that, plugin is required to share PowerPoint as a virtual background. Install. This might take a little time. We'll see if I need to do this a different way. I think this might be, I haven't experienced this with Zoom before. So it is installing a thing. I've always had it just work. So we'll see how that goes. I have a PowerPoint that kind of has my outline. So what we're aiming for today is an overview talking about communication and comprehension as priorities in a language classroom, what some of that means. I'll talk a bit about how I structure Chinese language lessons, both from kind of a short-term sequencing, like across a week or across a few hours of class time, and then how that cycle repeats across the school year. And then we'll do a language demonstration where some will be language students and maybe some will be observers. And when we get there, we'll decide if we want to use Thai or we want to use Chinese for that. And then do debrief that a little bit. So the goal is to kind of take away a few things that you can then put into practice across the next few weeks before we meet again at the end of February. So hello, second Christina. So Christina Crane, hi there. Nice to meet you too. Let me go ahead and see if this will let me share screen now. It will, okay. Let's go for that. It takes a moment to open. And then I still see you all up at the top of the screen, so I still have your video cameras on. I'm going to do myself big so that I can point at everything. So here we go. That's what I was hoping I remembered properly. Let's see if I got it. I think I did. Okay. I'll share a couple of documents at the end of the time that we have here too that relate to this stuff. There we go. Okay. Oh, I guess I should say one of the other things I do is that ACTFL, the National Language Teaching Association, has a special interest group on comprehension-based communicative language teaching. And I refer to that down here. I'm currently the chair of that special interest group, so that's fun. I wanted to start with a little bit of clarification of terms because I've seen sometimes things get mixed up or people are experienced with one area of comprehension-based teaching and don't know how others fit together. So I'm going to go maybe from what I think is maybe the most narrow to the most broad in terms of what happens in a classroom, what it might look like day to day in a class that's using this approach or this method. So TPR is total physical response. Is that sounding like, yeah. And then TPRS developed later, based first off of total physical response, and then developed, they changed the name so that it reflected more the importance of reading and the co-creation of stories. They say storytelling, but it's actually usually created with the teacher and students collectively. And then comprehensible input is there are two ways that this gets used a lot. It is a construct from research. People who are trying to understand how do people learn a new language wanted to investigate how that happens. And so the term comprehensible input comes from that. It's a thing. And it's subjectively determined. It's determined by the learner. Like if it's comprehensible to the learner, it's comprehensible input. So it's not just any old language, but it's language that the learner can understand. And I put this here because sometimes, particularly Chinese language teachers, find it tricky because there's a very, very small difference here, but a very major change in meaning if you say comprehensive. And so comprehensive would mean complete, thorough, including everything. Comprehensible input isn't intending that concept necessarily, unless the student is really, really advanced. So when I use, I might say CI sometimes, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm usually going to refer to the language input as itself. Sometimes people use this as a teaching strategy or a teaching approach. So there's kind of those two meanings that people will use for that. And then the broadest of the terms might be comprehension-based communicative language teaching. Bill Van Patten helped to establish that special interest group. And I think he chose that because he wanted to make it so that these things were in an umbrella of other things. And what I mean by umbrella is even somewhat literal. Get my forwarding there. This is by a teacher in Iowa, where I live. Elizabeth Dentlinger came up with this as kind of like, she was trying to say, like, it's not just TPR or TPRS, although those things are comprehensible input-based teaching. There's a lot of other possibilities. And I would say there's a few things that aren't here that maybe could be. Story listening, input-based tasks. Some things like I think you all may be doing, where you're doing art-based or activity-based lessons. So you're doing, you're using language in order to do some kind of activity or demonstrate a process of cooking something. And then the students are joining in with making that thing too. So that's not exactly on here. Think of that as kind of like really super extended total physical response, or maybe experiential learning. You're learning something beyond the language through the language. So just to kind of give a sense, like I'm thinking pretty big picture and thinking in terms of two priorities if we're going to teach language. And the first one is communication. So what I think often happens in language teaching is we start out, maybe we had it modeled to us when we were students. And so that's what we were used to, and that's what we're thinking about. I'd love to hear from you about this. Often people use the term practicing, like they're not thinking of it as really using language in the classroom to really communicate among us in the classroom. They're thinking of it like it's practicing for some other experience those students may have, they hope they will have some other time. I'd like to shift that. So we're thinking about, like, we're communicating in the classroom all the time with our own students and us as teachers being part of it. So it's not rehearsing for some future thing. It's actually hearing language, understanding language, and using it right then. Is that familiar, or is that like, whoa, deep and shifting things? Or you can turn on your voice if you want, or if you want to type in the chat, that would be fine too. I'll give you a minute.
Yeah, definitely the more traditional setting that I was used to in the Chinese schools. They use the rehearsal. And more so when I came over here, it's communication in the class, like right now, and practice it minimum of communication. So I feel that there's a shift of that. And it's definitely more retainable, I feel, for the students.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it feels like kind of the difference of like, oh, I have to do this thing because my teacher wants me to do it, versus there's some real reason we're talking, or there's some real reason I'm listening to the teacher because I'm going to need to do something real beyond just fill in a word in an exercise or something. Like, rather than just performing some kind of exercise or activity, there's some reason beyond that.
Yeah.
So Bill Van Patten, I'm going to draw on his thinking about this again a couple times today, probably. It talks about communication as being let's see if I can get it totally off the top of my head, the interpretation, expression, and sometimes negotiation of meaning in among people. So that could be written communication, that could be spoken communication. It can also include interpretation. So understanding others' language, it doesn't necessarily mean production at all the same level, at all proficiency levels. So that's all still communication when we do those things. So I'm checking my notes to make sure I get it. So so what would be some purposes perhaps that we could have in a language classroom that would make it really about communication versus just about practicing language? What kinds of purposes can you think of that would fit maybe your own classroom?
I have somewhat limited experience with this. I've been taking Kristen's Spanish class, so we've done some there. Yeah, I've actually taken Malut's class as well, and we did a lot of speaking there. And I think with my kids right now, I'm sort of working on the lower K5, I'm thinking K2-ish range.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of play. They like a lot of games, and they definitely need movement. But they've been really liking stories. And that's something that I've been playing with a little bit. So that's probably my main area. I've tried any of this, but I definitely am still searching for the what and how.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's a journey like through the career of a language teacher. Like this is the exciting thing about it. Like what else can we do that gives purpose beyond just looking at language and trying to practice doing language stuff? What gives us a purpose to hear and use language? So yeah, that sounds like some great stuff. I would say maybe in your case, some of the purpose there is entertainment, kind of to have fun, to enjoy themselves within the language, to use the language to enjoy being together, to be able to play a game, to be able to understand a story and enjoy it and think about it. I think those are real purposes. Yeah. Something else?
Two of my students are Asian by descent. So their parents would like them to be exposed to that culture, really.
Yeah. So it's, in a sense, maybe it's content. It's learning about heritage and making connections to cultural norms, cultural practices, things like that. It's, yes, like it's kind of an informational purpose, perhaps.
Yeah, and also a lot of the students' parents, they have some kind of business trade in China, and they would like their kids, they travel there a lot, so they would like their kids to learn that as well.
Yeah, and I would say maybe that sometimes tends to make people think in terms of practicing for the future, like rehearsing. I think it can be turned into something that's real communication if we're doing it like, imagine if you were da 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 da, and now we're doing this imaginative scene creation or story creation. So our purpose again is kind of entertainment, kind of preparing ourselves for something. But it's different from practicing, I'm going to say, because we're really talking to each other. We really have to understand each other, and we're really creating something in the language together. So yeah. Let's see if well, Malut hasn't said anything yet. Do you have something that you want to add? Oh, and you're muted. Let's see if I can, yeah, okay. There you go.
So you're talking about creating a purpose. Sometimes it can be on like a large scale, and sometimes it's just on the, like to trigger a need for students to, like you're dealing with a situation and you need to trigger their need to know or to learn something to use it in that situation. Is it like this you mean? Like to create the purpose?
This could be too. Yeah, it could be. And I think it connects to that informational kind of reason for language use. So if maybe they're seeing a picture from a different region of the world where the target language is spoken, and they're trying to understand what's going on in the picture. And so there's certain language that you'd need to use in that setting. And so we need to use it to talk about that setting. So yeah, so we hit some informational things, we hit some entertainment things. And then there's getting to know each other, social reasons to use language too. So one of the things that these can mix. So we could be doing something else, and then we ask the students their opinions or their experience or their impression, or we ask them to react emotionally to a story. Those are kind of finding out about each other and being able to use language to know each other better socially. So let's see if I hit anything else on my list. I think you all mentioned something that I have on here. imagining and discussing what's happening in a picture or a story, talking about ourselves and getting to know each other, learning to make and appreciate art or food or dance, learning how to do something or about something, listening and responding to stories from the culture within the new language. So those are some things that hit me, and I'm sure that's not the only purpose for what we could do in a classroom. So let me go to my next slide. So then that's communication as a purpose, and then comprehension as the second priority. And kind of, I think of these as like two pillars now. Sometimes I think within maybe a TPRS kind of approach or a CI teaching kind of approach, they're thinking so much of comprehension and not necessarily of purpose. So I'm trying to keep them both in there. So to me, they're like two legs. They help us have real purpose for what we're doing with language, and we're thinking attentively to the students' need to understand language. And so here I'm thinking not just single words, not just vocabulary lists or practicing and recognizing words alone, which I think that's been another big thing with language teaching. A lot of times we do lists of words that like 10 colors today or 8 fruits. And those, I don't know how well that serves the need of comprehension if our goal is proficiency. So if the goal is the students can understand and use language in context beyond just rehearsing in the classroom, just practicing words or just performing, we want them to hear lots of varied language, and we want them to hear it in context. And so giving them lots of opportunities to understand that language, and not just in words, not just in a phrase, not just in a practice conversation, but in real conversation that we have amongst ourselves as we communicate in the classroom. So yeah, so it's not just words, but keeping it as simple as beginners need. And because we're thinking about communication, that involves the students' understanding. So we need to be able to check in with them. How well are they understanding? So throughout the whole class, so that they determine the pace then, and their comprehension leads what we determine to do next. Like what we determine to do next, I mean, like which question might we ask? Will we go back and reread that sentence again? Or will we go on to a new sentence? And those kinds of right there in the moment, things based on the response of our students moment by moment. So that letting their comprehension kind of determine what the next step is. Let me think if I've got anything else with that. Yeah.
Oh, Diane.
Yeah.
So most of our students, I would say, are like K through 5 or something. Mm-hmm. So if I was doing like a lesson based on color, say, would that, I'm just trying to think of like, should I kind of, I don't want to get rid of the lesson on color. So my focus, you're saying, should be more like the sky is blue, as opposed to just, here's blue.
Blue. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sky is blue. Is the dog blue? Are you blue? Oh, you're not blue. The sky is blue. The dog is not blue, but the sky is blue. Am I blue? Like I'm thinking little kids too. So
right.
Yeah. So one of the purposes there is to be playful with them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it doesn't have to be mega complicated, but rather than just word level, you're giving them a rich language experience and context. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would look for ways to think about how can you spin it so it's a little bit more like that. Mm-hmm. I also tend to find those lists of vocab that's like a semantic set of vocab works better if you're doing something that's communication and comprehension oriented. It often will be easier to sprinkle those across time and maybe do 2 at a time, maybe 3 at a time, but rather than having the whole theme of the whole lesson being just colors. So it's this color or that color, something, doing something. That kind of,
Got it.
So no real clear rules here, but I found that helpful.
So in that context, do you mix English in it at all, or you just go pure the target language, even for beginners?
It'll depend a little bit, but I do use first language to help to clarify, and we'll see that when we get to the demonstration. So, and we can talk about that and how might that need to shift when students are too young to read their first language, because I do tend to use reading as things to help people understand new language they hear. But yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different possibilities with that. Okay, and then I want to get to sequencing a little bit, because you're going to see the sequence when we do the lesson demo. I keep having to move this because it's not letting me click at the bottom to forward the slide unless I'm a little bit smaller, but then I want to be full size. So, okay. So the way then, with those two things kind of in mind as my goals, then sequencing lessons week by week, I begin, and the next 4 sessions are all going to be talking about this again. So this is just like big picture, okay? And we'll get to details and some of the kinds of strategies you could use if you're wanting to adopt that same kind of sequencing and thinking about it. So I think first of auditory comprehension, using language they can understand, that they hear primarily. And not trying to link it to reading, not trying to show new script. If I show new words at that point in writing, it's in letters that are familiar to the students when they're beginners, particularly. In Chinese, this is done with pinyin. And so we have a very standardized way of showing the sounds of the Chinese words to the students. Pinyin it uses English letters, but it doesn't read like English does. So there's still some newness to it. But because they're hearing those words in context so many times during that lesson, they do okay. Even seeing the X and the Q and the ZH, I don't have to practice that kind of sound with them because they're going to hear it a lot in context, and it's going to start to emerge from their own speech in time, sometimes even just a few minutes into class. Sometimes for some students, maybe it's the next class that they feel ready and comfortable being able to pronounce that. But giving them lots of opportunities to respond so that I can see how they're doing with that. So beginning with oral language, and then seeing what seems to hold best with them, what words and phrases seem like they're really solid on. So what I'm looking for there is students are starting to say those words easily and without seeming to struggle. They're using them appropriately. So if I'm asking a question about a picture, they can use words that really match what we see in the picture effectively. They are, maybe they're not necessarily speaking in the target language in full sentences, but if I ask them a question, they're quickly answering comfortably, seemingly confidently, giving good one-word answers or head nods or head shakes. They're reacting emotionally to the meaning, and I'm seeing that happen consistently. So I'm looking for those two kinds of things, some nonverbal things, some verbal things. And then I'll move to reading. So I tend to avoid doing anything with characters until after I see that some of that language is now kind of sunk in, feeling solid, feeling comfortable. There's a couple reasons here. One is because of comprehension being such a priority for me. And then the other thing is cognitive load theory. The idea is that your brain can only do so much at one time. And if you're adding multiple things that it needs to do, they're going to have a harder time focusing on understanding the message. In the case of Chinese, this would be if we introduce the meaning of a new word, the way it sounds, the pinyin, the characters. Some teachers will even show the etymology of the character, the traditional script and the simplified, like they start adding a lot more. If you continue to add all of those things all at the same time, your students are going to not be able to focus on communicating and comprehending whole language as easily. it's going to be a strain for them. And some won't be able to do it, and some will get frustrated. So backing off from some of those things, simplifying what am I asking them to do mentally in any moment, and clarifying my expectations for them. It helps students to know what I'm looking for, that they don't have to get it all down right away, but I want them to be able to understand throughout the lesson and be able to respond. I think, so that's kind of, let's see, Christina, I think you might have, do you mind muting? I think I'm getting reverb from, yeah, thanks, yeah. So that's like kind of the week by week. I had about 4 hours with most of my classes per week. So we met 4 times per week out of 5 days. When I taught at a high school, we met 4 days out of 6, or 5 days out of 6, or 3 days out of 6, depending at the middle school level. So I saw them fairly often, and I had some hours per week. I understand that you all will not necessarily, especially the Chinese new program, you may not have that much time. And so I would be looking at how do I simplify down so that I can still follow that sequence, because I think that's effective, working from auditory comprehension. They're beginning to speak a little bit, moving to reading. Supported reading first, reading as a class, and then giving them opportunities with more independent reading. And then sprinkling in that reading across every other week after that. So it goes like one cycle a week at a time, 4 hours at a time, and then using that cycle again and again across the school year was my approach with that. And we'll get into details about that across the next coming weeks too, when we meet. Yeah, okay, I think we're ready for the Thai well, let me see. I think we have 2 people besides myself who are fluent in Chinese here. Am I right about that? So we have 2 people who are not fluent in Chinese. Now comes the question, who wants to be the language student? So I could use Thai, which maybe I shouldn't presume. Does anyone know Thai fluently? Okay, so that one's a possibility. Or we could do Chinese, and the Chinese teachers would watch. They would be observers. Christina and Malud, if you would be willing to be Chinese language students, we could do that. What do you prefer? It's good? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up from the 2 potential students, so we'll do that. I will switch out of this one and open up my Chinese language one. Any questions before we go on, or other thoughts or comments to add?
So in terms of if we only meet once a week and only for sometimes 40 minutes to an hour, do we have to spread out even slower in terms of the teaching lessons?
Yeah. And I would look for it so that, a verb, a noun, and that's the theme of the day. And then it's not that they just hear 2 words throughout the class, but I think you might feel it a little bit here. We'll see how this goes. And then continuing to use that language. Oh, that was the other thing. Let me do my little diagram over here on my whiteboard. This is a physical whiteboard on the wall behind me. So I'm glad you said this, partly because what I think we can do is start out like, this is the known language for our students, just a few things at first. And then we build from that so that it's slowly getting to be a bigger thing, but it's still always like this cloud. It's not like the traditional textbook approach, which is like this, I think. It's not totally unconnected, but it's like a train or something. You jump from car to car. First you had all the foods, then you had all the family members, then you had the colors, then you had animals. Then and it wasn't building on each other as much. So if we can move it so that we're using language that starts simple, but is naturally something we're going to use a lot and use again and again, then we can keep expanding it and keep reusing that stuff at the core as we build the students' vocabulary. So I would be looking for ways week to week to be able to keep doing that so that this part's never forgotten. Because if you only have an hour a week, they're really going to need to hear that again and again, each time you meet, to at least a little bit. Kind of the spaced repetition thinking about language exposure. So rather than, well, we did that, so they should know it. It was last month. And like, well, brains don't really do that so well with language. So, but they do this pretty well. Okay. So Malud and Christina Crane, right? You're my students. I'm going to try to move you next to each other in my view here. Let's see. I don't seem to be able to. Okay, you're kind of at the end. So if you see my eyes jump around a little bit, that's why. So I'll be looking at them, and then Christina Clark and Ying can observe. Some of the things that you can observe are on their faces and what they're doing. Some are what I'm trying to do. So we can think about things like, what am I doing to help make language comprehensible? What are students doing that helps them understand new language? And then what's going on in terms of purpose? What's the purpose beyond just practicing language? So for Malud and Christina, here are my expectations as we do this. We'll go for, let's see. I'm going to try to go for about 40 minutes. Okay. Looking for reactions. Okay, Christina, smile a little bit. Malud looks okay. Okay. If we need to pause in the middle, we can do that. And feel free at any time if you need to stand up. I'm actually standing in the room because it helps me move around a bit. So you want to listen and look with the intent to understand. I'm going to try to give you Chinese language that you can understand well, but I need to know that you're in on it, that you're working with me on that, because really you're the priority and not what I think you understand, but what you really do understand. So sometimes I'll ask you to respond. I might ask Christina, and I mean Christina Crane for this purpose, to answer something, or maybe Malud to answer something, maybe both of you together. I'll try to make that clear doing this or here. This means one person, and this is like everybody can answer. Everybody is two people right now, so yeah. We want to support the flow of Chinese. We want to stay in Chinese as much as we can. We'll use some English like I am now to help us with the Chinese. And then last expectation I have for students is to have a positive attitude about yourself as a language learner, about Chinese as a language that you can learn, about what we're doing here together. So it's not anything that gets graded, but it does really actually help you learn language. Okay. I might, just in the interest of time, I'll hold that one. Okay. And then I'm going to go over here.
Diane, you would have to teach us how to do that PowerPoint in your background. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's some of the things that we're doing here are also going to be that kind of, we're online versus being in a classroom. So we can talk about that, but to the degree that it is relevant for you. So let me erase my other stuff over here. Okay. Yeah. Okay.我有我有我有老鼠 老鼠，老鼠。Christina, Malud?
Rat.
老鼠。我有老鼠。我有老鼠。我没有。没有。我没有。猫。猫。猫。
没。
对对对，我没有猫。我有猫吗？我有猫吗？
没。
没有，没有。我没有猫。我没有猫。我有什么？我有什么？
老鼠。
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 对对对对。
我有老鼠。
Christina Alud 知道。我有老鼠。
老鼠。
老鼠有我吗？
没有。
没有，没有。What did I mean by that question?
Does the rat have me? Right?
对对对对对，知道了，知道了 means like you knew it。知道了。老鼠没有我，我有老鼠。
老鼠。
我没有猫。对不对？对对对对，我有老鼠吗？对不对？
老鼠吗？
我
我
有老鼠吗？我有老鼠吗？对，我有老鼠。我有老鼠，可是我没有猫。我没有猫，可是我有老鼠。对不对？是。Christina，你 你有老鼠吗？
没。
哦，Christina 没有老鼠，没有老鼠。哦，很好啊。Christina 没有老鼠，可是我有老鼠，我有老鼠。Christina 你有没有猫？And let's check. What does that question mean? Christina, 你有没有猫？
Do you have or don't have a cat?
It's another way we can ask a question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You have,
So this,
don't have a cat.
yeah. So let's make sure this time. Christina, 你有没有猫？
没有。
哦，没有。Christina 没有老鼠。Christina 也没有猫，对吗？对的，对的。我有老鼠，可是我没有猫。Christina 没有老鼠，也没有猫。马路，你有老鼠吗？
没
有老鼠。
我没有老鼠也猫。
哦，Christina，马路也没有老鼠。Christina，你没有老鼠。马路也没有老鼠。马路也没有猫。我没有猫。你们也没有猫，对吗？
I didn't understand this.
Yeah, I was waiting to see that, and then I realized I never gave you the signal to tell me if you're lost. Like this. And it's visual, and then in the classroom, you can actually hear the sound. And what I'll tell students, if you need me, if you're not sure how to respond, that's when you know you should stop me. I seem to be looking for something, but you don't know how to respond anymore. And so you need to tell me that. So if you see somebody do it, you do it too. So then I catch it faster and we can clear it up. Because my job is to help you understand the language. And your job is to let me know. so that's super. Yes, I did something on purpose. Partly because I like to see, this is a teacher talk moment. One of my little goals is to allow students who are really fast processors of language to have a little challenge, but not to lose anybody. And so this helps me not lose anybody. Once we build the trust that the students are really using it when they need it, and they're not feeling like, oh, but they got it, I bet they got it. It's not the goal here. The goal is that we're all communicating together. We're all understanding language. And some people are going to pick up a little bit more stuff, like Malud is already using big complex sentences. Great. Some other people might not be ready to talk as fast as that, and that's okay too, as long as we're all understanding. So that's, yeah. So that long explanation is to say this. Okay, so let's try it again. 我没有猫，你们
没有
也
有
没有猫。可是你们没有老鼠。我有老鼠吗？对，我有老鼠，可是你们没有老鼠。你们也没有什么？
猫？
对啊，你们也没有猫，我也没有猫。对啊，看，看，看老鼠。看老鼠。你们喜欢老鼠吗？你们喜欢老鼠吗？Christina 有一点喜欢老鼠，对吗？对。马伦，你也有一点
没有。
喜欢老鼠吗？
OK， 我喜欢猫。
哦，对，马伦喜欢猫。马伦，你不喜欢老鼠吗？
不行。我喜欢猫。可是不喜欢老鼠。
马伦喜欢猫，可是不喜欢老鼠。对 ，Christina，马伦喜欢猫，你也喜欢猫吗？
喜欢猫。
对 ，Christina 也喜欢猫，可是你们不喜欢老鼠，对不对？对的。我 喜欢老鼠。我喜欢老鼠。啊，我喜欢老鼠。可是，想象，老鼠喜欢我吗？ Let's check. What was my question?
Does the rat likes me, right?
老鼠喜欢我吗？想象。哦 Christina 老鼠
喜欢你。
哦，好啊，好。老鼠喜欢我，我也喜欢老鼠。可是你们不喜欢老鼠，对不对？想象，老鼠喜欢，不喜欢你们。Let's check. What's my question?
So imagine if imagine if the rat likes all of us. This is what you said, right?
Yeah. We know 老鼠喜欢我。
Yeah.
我也喜欢老鼠。可是老鼠，你们不喜欢老鼠。可是老鼠喜欢，不喜欢你们。
So I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
About the sentence structure. I'm a little curious about. It seems like the likes doesn't like part is throwing me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Is it asking? Does it like?
It's asking. It's making it a question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
喜欢，不喜欢. It's like in Hamlet, to be or not to be. In Chinese, that's normal. In English, it sounds funny, but in Chinese, we can do that.
And you say "ooh," is that or? Or is it just? You might hear things.
That's me.
I might just be making sounds. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll have to listen. There isn't an or like that. I haven't used the word or yet.
Okay, it might be the boo that I'm hearing.
Oh, yes. There's no need to say the word or in that. Yeah, we just say 喜欢,不喜欢, and we know it's asking.
I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. But I need an answer. 老鼠喜欢不喜欢你们?
So the question here is, does she like all of us, right? All of you.
Yeah, 老鼠喜欢不喜欢, and I'm thinking of my students now, Malud and Christina Crane, particularly.
Okay.
你们不喜欢老鼠.
Yeah.
可是老鼠喜欢不喜欢你们？
老鼠不喜欢我。
哦，
嗯，
老鼠不喜欢 Christina？
嗯
你不喜欢 Christina 吗？
老鼠不喜欢野虎。
哦，老鼠也不喜欢 Malud？
Yeah.
你你不喜欢 Christina， 也不喜欢 Malud 吗？你们知道老鼠不喜欢你们。Okay. I'm going to stop with that part and switch, and we'll see. I have about 15 minutes that I'm hoping to go. And then I think after that, we might be ready to do some reading that uses a some, but not all of these words. You're doing great. Do you want to stretch? Like stand up, stretch, or if you need, it's been an hour about, do you want to take like a real break, like go get something to drink, use the bathroom? Should we take a couple of minutes for real? Okay, let's do that. I'll set. Yeah. So Christina and Malud, thank you so much. You're doing wonderful as students, and I'm getting to see the faces of the Chinese knowers over here, and they're excited for you. So I don't know if you're seeing them too, but they're having fun watching you.
Diane, can I ask you really, really super quick about your May? And you have a capital I. Do you do that for like, and I noticed it on one of your questions that you had written, you had the G that was capital. So
yeah.
What's going on?
What's going on with that? We'll talk about it in more depth, but the basic is it's using capitals to help reflect the tones. I learned this from Terry Waltz, and I like it. It's trying to give another visual thing that the brain can catch the tone besides the tone marks and hearing it, something else visual. Usually in a classroom, I would be using the colors that you see on the sheet. What I've found on my whiteboard is that the colors don't show up well. And so they don't help the students, and it's harder for them to see the words that are in red or green. And so I don't do it on my whiteboard online, but I do in a classroom.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take another minute or so, or we'll wait to see Christina Crane come back, Casa, and I'll sip my tea. And but if you do have other questions while we're kind of taking a break, that's fine with me too.
So it's also very interesting, like when you see this these words in Chinese and also the equivalents in English, they help a lot to combine the words to form sentence. Like now I can see like
so many different things, right?
Yes. So it's very interesting. Like it's easy to form a complicated sentence right now using this. So the problem is that if you stop practicing, like after just a few minutes, you lose these words, this new vocabulary.
Could be. Yes. Yeah. What I want to kind of get it to is that so it's kind of saturated in your mind enough so you don't have to really think about it, and you don't really have to see me point to it in time. And before we read, I would want to see that happen for you. And I don't expect that it's happened for either of you yet, but I think it's in good progress. I was starting to speak a little faster. I don't know if you could tell, but you were still tracking pretty well. And then you're using that, stop me or get clarification. So that helped me to learn where the pace needed to be. The other thing is with young kids, they'll just show on their face. Like they'll be like, they'll do like goofy things with their faces. And so you can read them pretty easily. Adults or older students sometimes like to hide that and they mask it because I think we have this sense that, you know, I don't want to embarrass the teacher, I didn't understand, or maybe I feel like I should have gotten it, or maybe if I just listen longer, I'll get it. Oops, wait a minute, now I'm really lost, you know? So adults do that and older kids do that more often. But I think it's in some ways reading where the comprehension is easier for really young kids because they'll just not put up with it. Like, I don't know what you're saying, you know, like literally they'll do that. It's fun.
Yeah, it's very interesting just in a matter of minutes, like how many vocabs you're introducing. And Christina and Malou were able to form that sentence, even though they have to visually look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to keep the scaffolding here. And this is not, oh, and I should have said this too before we began. The difference between like a first day of class and every other day after is that I do more of a load on the first day, but then I wouldn't move off of this for a long time. And this is why carefully choosing which of those first few words you introduce to what can you do in minimal numbers of words that are still interesting and still can be recombined in different ways. What I started to learn was that but and also are really powerful for extending discussion. Now we can compare different people in the class. If you have likes and doesn't like, have and don't have, there's a lot of power to draw on in those words. You know, somebody has something that they don't like, somebody doesn't like something that they don't have. Well, that's not as interesting maybe, but you saw us playing with that a little bit. And then just a couple of pronouns were all I needed. If it had been the Thai demonstration, we would have just used names pretty much. Partly pronouns are crazy complicated in Thai, and they use names that way. They tend to avoid using pronouns to some degree. So it depends on your language.
Sorry, I noticed that you have different like postcard where you have all these common use. How do you categorize them differently?
Useful words. Let's see. These are like student reaction words, kind of. And then that's like an instruction. And then questions. These are the most basic ones. And then a little bit more meaty. And then on the inside, I have more of them. So I teach levels that get a little more advanced. I don't tend to use those ones on the inside with beginner lessons. This is more than enough for a first lesson for me. Because really, I'm just going to focus on the yes/no questions, maybe get to the or, and then maybe just asking about opinions so far is all that we've done. Let's see. We good to do a little bit more? Yeah, Christina Crane, I see your hand. Oh, and you're muted, so.
I just changed my screen around. I'm trying to find everybody again. So I had two questions. Let's see if I can remember both of them. One was, I mean, I'm trying to set myself up for teaching the 4th through 5th graders. And so I could see using these words, they know how to read and write. But in the immediate time, I'm working with some kids who are just starting to read. How do you scaffold? I mean, do you use the writing as scaffolding? Do you use something else as scaffolding? Do you teach in a different way? Do you have, I guess I'm just wondering how to transfer that.
I hear different things from different people who teach non-literate people, even adults who don't read the shared language with the teacher. So they often will draw more pictures. So maybe I would have one little sign that was 喜欢, and I might tell them verbally, likes, it means likes. And then keep using that sign again and again if they're not able to read that word in English. Because we don't need to burden them with that kind of thing. I do know with Chinese and younger students, there's a variety of thinking about, do I introduce pinyin to them right away? Do I just go for characters directly? Do I delay it all and just let them hear? And we can talk about it maybe next time we meet, we'll do auditory input as the focus.
So if when I teach, I use the pinyin, but I also write the Chinese character on it. Would that distract them? Should I take that totally out?
Now, we have language teachers here today, so we might have the kind of people who are interested in seeing that right away. So I hesitate to ask, but Christina Crane and Malud, if you had characters on here for every word with this, with the meaning, how would that affect you, do you think?
I feel like
So
I might be sorry, I think it might be processing a lot for me visually. Just knowing how I learn. I do like visual cues, but I feel like I would maybe start.
There's a lot of new stuff here. As you pointed out, this is a lot of language to introduce just in a half hour or so.
Yeah.
So,
I like the idea, but I think it would be.
Yeah. Now, if it was really important to me, like I really want them to see some characters today, even though they're maybe not ready to read in context yet, I would do it as a brain break. And I would do it so like I might pick kan or something that's got some visual cues in it about the meaning. Kan looks like a hand over an eyeball, for those who aren't familiar with that. So I might pause and do that and then have them all do it and have them stand up and move around a little bit. But I wouldn't put it up here because of that issue of like, where do I look? Which things are going on? It's that cognitive load theory. Like if I'm giving them, the more information I'm giving them, the more processing load they're going to have. And the more likely they're going to shut down something else. So it might be shutting down the meaning and context, because we were doing a lot of context-based, questions, whole answers, comparing. They were giving me their opinion of things. They had to process that too. So I wanted to give them space for that. My feeling about it is that I love characters and I want students to be really successful with characters. And this is how I've found it's been better. So it's like the goal is still the same, that they really love characters, read characters, understand them well. But by delaying them until the language is kind of seeped in, it's been more effective overall. There's a few kids that can do it, but I want to get at all of them. So
it's definitely you're starting to communicate without knowing any characters. How many hours would you think when you start to introduce that connection of character and pinyin together?
Right. I would not use pinyin together. I would just show them the characters in reading. And actually, that's what I hope to get to. I'm hoping about 15 more minutes of language demo, and then we'll do debriefing. Does that sound okay, Christina and Malud? Are you still good for that? Okay. I think I will be pushing you a little bit harder than I would if you were 8-year-olds. So there would be a little difference in pacing from what we're doing, but also if I were really your first day Chinese language teacher, I would maybe delay the reading until the second day, just given how much time we have. I'm going to push you a little bit on that just so that the Chinese teachers can see where we would go with it. So it may feel a little bit more like, ooh, this is going to be a little tougher than I would normally aim for. So with that caveat, I think we'll see how it goes, okay? We'll do a few more minutes with some auditory input stuff, and then we'll look at some reading. Okay. Now, I'll go back to those words that are over here if you need them. They're all still there. And you can always stop me. Oh, one other thing I should say. Yo. 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 有老鼠吗？有 Christina， 你看到 means like you can see, you see. 你看到老鼠？哦，马伦，你也看到了老鼠吗？哦，
Yeah.
老鼠对不对？ 哦，不对，不对。我也看到了老鼠，老鼠，对吗？对，有老鼠，
看到老鼠，
有老鼠。看有没有猫？有猫吗？看看。对呀，Christina 没看到猫。What do I mean by that? Christina 没看到猫。
Christina doesn't see a cat.
She didn't see it. Yeah. 没有看到猫。没有。马伦，你看到了猫吗？哦，老鼠。你看到了老鼠。你看到了猫吗？
猫吗？
没有，没有。我也没有看到猫。可是，我看到了老鼠。有老鼠。有老鼠。可是 this is my little gesture for 可是。可是没有猫。没有猫。看有猫吗？
我看猫。
马路看到了猫。Yeah, 我看猫 is like I'm looking at the cat. 我看到了猫 I see a cat. I saw a cat. 对 Christina 你也看到了猫吗？Christina 也看到了猫。有猫。有猫。有一只猫。也有老鼠。对不对？对呀，对呀。看猫看到了老鼠吗？猫喜欢不喜欢老鼠？
猫喜欢猫鼠。
对。猫看到了老鼠。猫喜欢老鼠。老鼠看到了猫吗？想象。老鼠看到了猫吗？老鼠也看到了猫。猫看到了老鼠。老鼠也看到了猫，所以它跑了。怎样？有猫跑，对吗
？Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
sometimes you add ma, like you say, lao shu, kan daula mao ma. So I just, I want to understand.
Why am I doing that?
The ma you add after the ma.
Oh, it's making it turns a sentence into a question when I stick it at the end. Yeah, then there's the other way to do it too, where 喜欢不喜欢. So that's also a question in there. Cool. Yeah. Mao 看到了老鼠，老鼠也看到了猫。对对对。Okay. I'm going to stop it here, but this is a story from a really short video clip, but I just took screenshots and did it. I'm going to show you the screenshots. You may not have noticed this.
Oh, yes, hen.
Yes. And so some students will catch it and some won't. And it's very fun because, you know, they're focusing in on this storyline here, cat, mouse. Ooh, is the cat going to get it? And then all of a sudden, and yeah, I warned them at one point, okay, this is kind of documentary-like violence, but there's no gore. They expect it's coming from the cat, but look at the cat. So we can, again, reuse all those words. Who has the mouse? I introduce the word chicken when we need it. Does the cat have the mouse? Does the mouse have the chicken? Does the chicken have the mouse? Who sees who? Who likes who? That kind of thing. So we can stay within those same words. I would ideally give you more time before this, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Okay. So what I do is, and maybe I should keep it over here. Okay. How this works is this is also a Terry Waltz innovation called cold character reading. So the idea is that you get language that you heard and understood so well. When you hear it read aloud and you see the characters, all that you're adding now is you've had this sound and meaning. You've got that locked in pretty well with some of the words, and all the words that are in the reading, ideally, I would have for sure that strong for you both. I think they're pretty good, and I think you'll be okay, but it's not absolutely ideal. I would give more time if we had more time. So you're matching up sound to meaning with those words. One of the things I could do if I really wanted to check is I could say words and you could tell me the English meaning at this point, or you could do gestures, or you could act them out. Because of time, I'll reserve that, but that's another thing I would do in the classroom to check before we read. So then the idea is that you're going to see the characters, and I'm going to start reading out loud, and you're going to join in when you recognize them, because they're going to make sense. They're going to be words that you know. There's going to be some pictures to help kind of catch what those are. So here we go. 有老鼠. And then I'll check in, since it's the first time you've read in Chinese script, I'll check in that you know what the meaning of the sentences are, so that you know that I know that you know what they mean. So it's not just that you're guessing, but you understood it as well. Okay, so what's that first sentence mean? Do you need to hear it again?
Yes, please.
Yeah. 有老鼠. How would you say that in English?
Have a rat, right?
Or there is. Yeah.
Oh, there is
a. There is. 有老鼠. 老鼠. 没有猫. 没有猫. What's the meaning there?
I think it's not a cat.
There isn't a cat.
There isn't a cat.
Yeah, something like that. 没有猫. 没有.
Mayo.
没有.
有.
No.
Mayo.
猫.
Mayo.
What does the cat say?
This is Mao.
There's no
Mao.
There's no cat.
Yes.
There isn't a cat. There's no cat. Probably makes sense best. May.
May. Yao.
Yo. Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mayo. Mark Zuckerberg. What do I mean?
There is not Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. We're still establishing who we have. Yeah.
May Yao.
Michelle Yao.
Yao. May Yao Michelle.
Yeah, Mayo Michelle Yao. What's that sentence? Yeah.
That's
Not
also there isn't
Also nice. Right. There isn't Michelle Yao either. Do you know something that you both have in common with Michelle Yao and Mark Zuckerberg and me?
humans.
In addition, second language speakers of Mandarin Chinese. Michelle Yao's first language is Cantonese, not Mandarin. So we have that in common. Welcome to the second language Chinese club.
Okay.
可是
Yao. Something that.
Lao. How about the meaning there? 可是有老鼠.
Is that there isn't rat either, right? Yes. No.
Listen to it this time, and this is where we're getting like. Ideally, I would give you more time with those words. 可是有老鼠.
But I have a rat.
But there is a rat, right?
Oh no, haven't.
你们知道，你们知道了。对，有老鼠。
有老鼠。
是啊，老鼠说有老鼠. Yeah. Okay. And my timer went off, so we're right around where I was wanting to be. That actually, you were doing great for that. And again, I think it wasn't the ideal time to introduce all of the reading. What happens from this point on, I would continue from there. 老鼠喜欢猫. 老鼠很喜欢猫. Now we're getting into some words that we didn't have time for. And really likes the cat, but there isn't a cat. No. There's a mouse. And then he's really getting fed up because I keep just talking about what there is a mouse. There's a mouse, but there isn't a cat. There's a liking cat mouse. And it kind of goes on from there, but there is no cat. He's very sad. But now there is a cat. And there's a change. There's a mouse and there's also a cat. The mouse sees the cat. The mouse likes the cat a little bit. No. The mouse really likes the cat. The cat-loving mouse really likes the cat. But does the cat like the mouse? Do I like the mouse? Is it a mouse-loving cat? Or is there? So the mouse sees the cat. The mouse also likes the cat. The mouse sees the cat, but the cat doesn't see the mouse. Now the cat sees the mouse. Oh no, there's a mouse. But the mouse doesn't like the cat. The cat doesn't like the mouse. So it actually, it keeps going like that for a bit. That's the end of it. So it's a sad story. The mouse likes the cat, but the cat doesn't like the mouse. So there's more language than we could get to in that demo time, but within about a week of class time, that's good. That's where I go with that. And then I do some kind of follow-up that's a little more independent. By the time you had maybe 20 or 25 panels with those same few words, they come up a lot. I'm looking for aiming for like 10 times each. Any of the words that I kind of want you to retain in your own ability to read. And so then I do a little reading thing that they did on their own that are just single sentences without the visual now. So as a check, and they could do that as a partner thing and figure it out. They could draw it, they could act it. And then it's a different story. Ooh, need to check my formatting. This time, the mouse didn't see the cat, and now there isn't a mouse anymore. And this one was fun because now they can imagine, is it because the cat ate the mouse? Is it because the mouse ran away? What happened to the mouse? But he's gone. So build on that. And the Chinese teachers probably caught this, looking at that picture of all 12 animals from the Chinese zodiac. What I'm aiming for in this lesson is also something that leads towards a story. The story of the rat and the ox being the first and the second in the Chinese zodiac, and why is there no cat in the zodiac? And we get there. Actually, I did 8 hours of Chinese lessons with a group over the summer last year, and that was the final lesson, was that story of the rat and the ox. Was the rat a good friend to the ox? Was the ox a good friend to the rat? What about to the cat? And the story of them being in the zodiac race to determine who got to be an animal year. So it is connecting back into Chinese culture, just not quite yet, but it gets there. And I'm hoping that they start getting this curiosity where, but yeah, why isn't there a cat? That's a really common animal. What's going on? So it seems to work. It also seemed to hit that goal that I have for intercultural competence, where they're starting to understand, like, the story means something to them too, because they've heard the whole thing in the language. They've had a lot of time to process it, and they're thinking about, what does that say about how we should act, or that kind of thing. So let me stop share. And I'm going to go back to my other one. If you want to stand up, stretch real quick, I will open the next file.
Ich habe sie.
I'm going to flip ahead several. Tie there.
I have a quick question. Does the student in your class, do you ask them to take notes, or you would say that just listen?
I don't, but some students like that. So I let them, here is where I wouldn't, if I felt like everybody was doing it and I wasn't getting the kind of participation, like the responsiveness that I need. So I would maybe pause, and like when we've paused a couple of times during the lesson, maybe then you can write down what I had on the whiteboard or something, make some kind of arrangement so that if students really want to do that, they can. The other thing I did was the words that would show up here could be then put into, I used a site called World Language Games, and you can input your own words, sentences, and stories into that database and turn them on and off. And students have different kinds of activities that they can do with that language on their own time. So, and one of them is like a study guide. So for students who feel that they want that, I do that. And then I kind of give them the caveat that, you know, in our class, we're focusing on communication and comprehension of language in context. So studying words isn't probably going to hurt you, but it's not the same as doing that. So you might want to look at the stories, or at least the sentences, if you want to play some of those games that might help you more than just practicing words. So, yeah. So we have about 25 minutes, or just about. What did you see, think, wonder about? Here's some things that came up. I hope I aimed to hopefully do that. I talked a little bit about what I might do next with them, but how would it be different in a school and how would it be different with young children? We might talk about that. I wonder, maybe we could start with students, people who were just learning some Chinese, and then look at observers, what you might have noticed different things about some of these thoughts. And for this, if you want to just unmute and jump in.
One question I had was, you mentioned that in certain languages, grammar can be challenging. German, you know, A has multiple ways, especially, for example, with I have. With certain nouns, it's going to be ich habe einen, and with others, it's going to be ich habe ein or ich habe eine. Mm-hmm. Is that too complicated to be saying? It's really hard to say I have something without using those.
Right.
How would you explain that, or would you explain that?
I wouldn't probably explain it, except to say something like, in German, we say it like this now, and like that then, or something like that. I'm thinking especially for little kids. If you're talking with little kids, I sometimes try to sneak in things like that like I just say it. And if I see them show concern that they're not understanding, then I give that. But I would say use natural language, just very simple language, and then help them understand the meaning in context rather than trying to give them a rationale. They probably don't need the rationale to understand it. Like if you tell them, here's the phrasing, this phrase means a cat, and now it means a cat again. We just say it differently here. Mm-hmm. So with older kids or very analytically minded kids, if they continue to ask, I'll say, yeah, you have such interesting, like I do my timeout, you have such interesting questions. Can we talk at the end of class? Because it's not bad. It's great that they're curious about the form of the language. They're being a linguist, but it just interrupts the flow of the communication. So we want to put that at a pause, at a break, or at the end of class. And I've only had a couple of students who really were into that myself. I think it bothers us as teachers a little more. We're more concerned than they usually are. They're kind of like focused, like if I can understand and feel successful, I'm going to be okay. Oh, I forgot too. I didn't put on the list here. Thinking of communication and purposes for needing to use the language, did you observe any purpose or purposes in that demonstration? I would argue it was more than just practicing language.
I mean, I think there's the element of, I don't know if this falls into practice or purpose. It seems like there is, or do you have, are just super common words.
Yeah.
So introducing that.
Yeah, I think that serves communication really well. Being able to have some really high-powered verbs early has been really helpful to me, because then now within just knowing a handful of words, you can say something kind of meaningful, something that has more implications than just this one. You know, 老鼠 is kind of fun to know, but hopefully you won't have too many opportunities to use 老鼠. but yo, wow, you could use that every day, all the time. And so the interesting 老鼠kind of carries these high impact verbs is kind of the way I think of it now. Having something that's interesting to hook those more boring but really important verbs. Yeah, Malud.
So for me, like this demonstration was like the first stage. It was like preparation for the second stage, which is reading. So it was like pre-reading stage where you introduce the vocabulary items and we try to practice. And then it was easy for us to read them and to see them as characters. It was like this.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Yeah. Having enough of that auditory time, hopefully you weren't having to work as hard when you got to the reading, because you've got two stage. Yeah.
Yes.
Other thoughts? And observers as well, if you want to add ideas. Ying and Christina.
I really like the comparison between have, don't have, like, don't like, and the repetitiveness, so that the language are there, and also make it very interesting for the new language. It's a different perspective when I'm seeing that. Just like if you're doing a Thai lesson right now, it would be the same. It's different as the student, and the pace that we need the time for allow them to introduce the character. I could see that because, you know, again, I'm coming from just teaching the heritage traditional Chinese. The pace is definitely very different when you're introducing a new language.
Yeah.
And just focusing on cat and rat, this two simple thing, but then making a story around it using different verbs and feelings, or imagine or think about it, definitely helps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that there's one of those purpose words. Like I can't remember when I started to realize that this word and this word, and actually this one too, but especially these two, as introducing those early by putting them on a poster on the wall, or in my case online, I just hold them up to the screen. These add so much possibility to what we can talk about with very simple language. We don't have to talk about just ourselves or just real things, although that was one of my purposes. I wanted to find out, really, like, do they like rats? It's interesting when you meet somebody in one of these times where I've used this lesson, like sometimes people like rats. I used to have pet rats. So, you know, it's fun to find those things out. Who likes cats? Who doesn't like cats? That can be a big argument and go there. But also then being able to imagine. So there was another purpose, being able to imagine like what's going on in that picture, being able to imagine something about my stuffed rat. Do I actually do that with adults? Yeah.
And going back,
I do that same lesson with adults.
Yeah, kind of like we're always going something that I'm expressing. How about what they think about us? So that's a different approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't get as much in terms of like informational content or yet directly cultural content, but that's in mind. That's coming up later. So I've got kind of my backwards plan of these, 8 to 10 hours of the first few weeks in Chinese are kind of working towards that. Any other thoughts about things you saw, things you have questions about? And I'll say too, like I think of this as much more of an art. So it's not like I did it all correctly today. No, it's like there is no one correct for one. But also I may have missed some things. Partly the online format, it makes it trickier. I did go a little faster than I would do with young kids, especially. And if there was more time, of course, we'd do it a little differently. But then
so I have just a
you still did great, I think.
Question. So in Chinese, 老鼠 also can be mouse. So do you point that out ever, or?
I let the first word go. Like if somebody says it must mean mouse, I use mouse. And if somebody says it means rat, I use rat. Maybe later on, like 小老鼠 and 老鼠 and start clarifying like, well, if you really want to be sure you're talking about a mouse, you can say this. But I don't, yeah. As long as the words for animals in Chinese are a little bit broader than they are in English. So like the word that means cow also could refer to ox or to cattle or to a buffalo even. You add another word to kind of clarify the distinction. So you can use it in a general sense.
So I have a couple questions about, you have ways to involve all students on there. And, I learned a little bit about teaching younger kids, especially, and not sort of pushing them too soon to speak. And I'm wondering how you're working to involve all students while still not putting that pressure on, especially, and I'm thinking, because I haven't ever taught 30 students, I mean, I'm sort of new to teaching language particularly, and I definitely haven't taught in a classroom setting like that. So I'm wondering if there's any tips you have for that.
Yeah, I think movement, emotional reactions, and then those bottom words. Like every kid can start using those pretty fast. If you have equivalents in the language you teach of like wow and oh no, and this depending on how you say it could be oh, or it could be oh. So you kind of have a couple of options there. Those really help. So then even though they're not saying a lot, they feel like they're actually contributing something. We really do that in real speech. We react to each other emotionally, showing those things. And so I put those up on the wall, and I start using them as soon as I can to kind of model it. And then if a student does it, I give them a big high five, like, oh, it was super. You want to encourage that kind of thing. So I guess that is still speaking, but it doesn't feel like the kind of speaking where, oh, I had to put that sentence together in my mind. The other thing with littler kids, having them move. So in the case where if you had been 30 people, maybe we would have had anybody on camera, okay, move to this side of the camera, or no, better yet, if you like cats, stand in the middle of your camera. If you don't like cats, move away from your camera. And so then now we get this nice visual picture of everybody on screen and they're reacting by movement. Doing that kind of thing with little kids is helpful. Or in a classroom, okay, if you like cats, go there. If you don't like cats, go there. And if you think cats are kind of okay, stand in the middle. Okay. And then now when they're there, you talk about it. So like, oh, look, 4 people don't like cats at all. Is that right? You don't like cats? But look, 1 person thinks cats are okay. And 12 students love cats. And now we can talk about them and keep using that same simple language, but we're doing something. We're learning about each other, making connections with each other in the classroom, finding out who's the same, who's different.
That's great. And when you're explaining to them to go to the side of the screen, are you staying in the language for that? Are you able to do that simply enough, or do you?
I think you could. I think it'd be harder online than if you were in a classroom where you can physically point and walk over, and you could demonstrate it. Like you could like walk over there. 我喜欢猫。我不喜欢猫. I mean, I can imagine doing that with younger kids in a room. Online, I would probably explain. I would give them a word or a sentence in English. What I would I'm thinking of the first month of class, like those kinds of exploratory lesson things. I end up using English for some of those instructions when they're, because it keeps us actually with more time left for the target language that they can understand. But if it were a class that was a year class, and if this was a kind of instructional thing, I would do a lot. I started the year with TPR, that total physical response, and I found some of the things that I needed to have them do during class. Things like get up, walk over to the bookshelf, get a book, and sit back down. Go get up, walk over to the shelf, get a whiteboard, get a marker, and sit down. Go to the door, close the door, turn the light on, turn the light off. Slowly walk to the table. Put your backpack under the table. Like all those, like we worked on those in Chinese 1 for the first few weeks of the class, like first few weeks of the school year. And then I could stay in the target language predominantly. The other thing I might do is put a poster on the wall and point, like this kind of thing, but it would be a little bit more extensive. I don't need them when I teach online, but in a classroom I did. Things like, may I go to the bathroom? Can I please say that slower? Some of those things, those were up on the wall, and then I could point to them and I could use them and model them to students, and then they could refer back to that and use it. Did you catch any differentiation stuff that I did? We just had 2 students. If we had a room of 30, it might come across a little bit more.
What do you mean by differentiate? Like giving different levels?
Giving options so that students at different levels of, or different preferences even, for what they like to do. Do they like to be more quiet and observing? Do they like to really jump in and be more active and talk sooner? Do they need more time to process the meaning? Are they really quick and they're just getting everything, and so they're like wanting more new words? Like all kinds of differentiation.
So
I would say
Diane,
that,
sorry, I have a 5-year-old who he's pretty good about like saying something in the language, but then he'll just be like, and my mom went to the store and blah, 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 you know, and then like keeps going on and on.
Yeah.
So yeah. How do
you deal with that?
Do you have like a symbol or something to like, you know?
Yeah. Do you have the opportunity to talk with that student privately? Like at any point, like before it happens, not like in the moment that it happens, but I mean, at some time?
Possibly. So this is on Zoom. So
that makes it a little trickier. Yeah. Well, maybe on Zoom, what you end up needing to do is that you are kind of stuck with the whole class format. What I'm thinking of is something like one of the things that I love about this class is that sometimes people have these great connections they make, but then we go a long time in English. So if anybody sees that happen after the teacher's long English right now, we're going to do this and let each other know like, oh, wait, we got a little off track. We're going to pause and then continue. So I don't know. That's off the top of my head. That's the kind of thing I would think of with really young kids. It's not even intentional. I think it's just personality. That's a really outgoing, extroverted kid maybe. And then he processes out loud and he's made a connection and he's so excited. And like giving a cue of some kind after there's an understanding, like, I love that you're so excited about this. We want to use our limited class time well, though. And so what can I do to remind you that, oh, wait, this is time for Chinese, not time for English? Like along those lines. I used to have signals with a student who he didn't have official documented learning differences, but we all thought he should. His parents wouldn't have him tested. So we started using things that were like that, little cues with him, like you need to get up and move and walk around the room, kind of that kind of thing. And signals that the other students didn't know because he was very embarrassed by it, but he really did need the support that way. So that kind of thing.
I have a question about the TPR. Do each coaches get to make up their own, or is there like a set of ways that?
I think you could do it together. I saw your planning documents. It seems like since you're doing a lot of things with the same kind of framework in mind, you might be able to come up with, these are 10 things we think probably everybody in classrooms would need and work from there. I just kind of sat down on my own because I was the only Chinese teacher. And we didn't really coordinate at that level with my colleagues all that much. So I kind of thought about what is it that I do often in class or that I'd like to be able to do without having to explain it in English again. And then started breaking those down into little bits. One, just stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. And in the case of high school kids, they would get really sick of it. When that happened, I would start taking volunteers because now we have a performance artist that is going to demonstrate for us, sitting down slowly, and then it became fun again, where not everybody had to do it. They still benefit from seeing and hearing the language at the same time like that. They're still getting language input that makes sense, and they're going to gain from it, even if they're not physically moving every time. With younger kids, they're more inclined to like to move. And with 4th and 5th grade, they were always into it, unless it was right after gym. So those kinds of differentiation things kind of happen too. You get to know the students and see what they like.
Is there anything else you can think of that tends to be specific to 4th and 5th graders in terms of delivering language in this way?
Maybe, I'm not sure exactly how to apply it, but in 4th grade, I always found that there was such a very big push for being fair. That was their favorite word. And I found it out by not calling on the equal number of boys and girls in a class. They told me, you called on a boy last time. And like, that is, I can't. I mean, like, you know, and of course, yes, I want to be concerned about equity in the classroom and evenly calling on different identities of children. Yes. You know, so maybe I need to reflect on that too, but they were really concerned. Like it wasn't okay just across the class period. They needed to see turn by turn, I was being fair in their mind. Fifth graders never had that. And so when I started teaching fourth grade, I was like, wow. I think also for me, learning what the homeroom teacher's cues are for them about when we're going to move to a new activity, when we're going to put things away, or like, how do we end the class period? Do they line up at the room and they wait for somebody to pick them up? Like all of that, I had to learn that. And fourth grade was entirely different from fifth grade at the school where I taught those two grades. The fifth graders were more independent and the fourth graders had a teacher come and pick them up. They needed to line up and wait in a certain way even. And so reinforcing what their homeroom teacher does, whatever that is, was really helpful in helping them know I was consistent and that I had less issue with classroom management because I was matching what they were used to.
I was in a pod teaching fourth and through eighth graders now with 10 kids, and fairness is a big thing. So what the teacher told me that there's called like a jar of fairness, where all the kids' name is on a popsicle stick. So every time I call on someone, instead of just people raising their hand, because there's a lot of quiet kids that wants to answer, just never have a chance, because they would always say, me, pick on me. And then, so there's a jar of fairness, and the teacher just pick it, call the name, and they're okay with that.
Yeah, that's great. I also like to do things where it's everybody's going to answer together at the same time. So online, that's actually easier online. So watch, here we go. I'm going to count down to 5 and then everybody can answer. Wait, hold it. Okay. And now everybody can answer. And so everybody has some more think time, but they get to say it. The other thing is like using little whiteboards or a white piece of paper that students are writing on so that they're putting their answer there and then they hold it until, okay, now everybody show your answer. And so then that gives quiet kids also the opportunity. And in kids that need a little bit more time, the ones that are really fast can handle that. They don't have to blurt their answer immediately. They can hold it in a little bit. It's okay. Yeah, it's almost 1. Any other things? I feel like we've gotten a lot of discussion about that. So cool.
I have one last question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh my gosh, that's nuts. And I totally go. Oh no, okay. So we have about an hour, I think. Are you doing this the whole time? You know, are you breaking it up at certain intervals with brain breaks, or, you know, sort of what's the time structure?
Yeah,
of this?
and again, with younger kids, even less. I think I've heard it like the number of their age is maybe the number of minutes on a task. So if they're 10 years old, 10 minutes, and then do something different. And that doesn't have to mean like complete switch. Like with some of those things, maybe it means I just use yo for 10 minutes. And then we stand up and we do a little stretch break and do something like that. And now the thing that's different is now I'm adding in the word likes and yo. And then like, I don't know, something along those lines. So there's something that feels a little different, but with really young kids, yeah, that all the more. I would say 5-year-olds in 5 minutes seems a little ambitious to me, actually. But being aware of your students, and I guess seeing it as you're communicating in real time with your class, you're checking in on their comprehension. So it's a student-centered pacing. And if you see them start to get kind of frazzled, then you know you want to do something different. And that might just mean, okay, now did I let them move in the past 5 minutes? How can I have them move now? And have them get up and be in a different position can be helpful too. So formal brain breaks are good, but also then just like do something else.
Great, thank you very much. It's very, very informative today, just in the first section.
Well, good. Yeah. So we'll be breaking down things and talking strategies in depth. And so we'll be revisiting a lot of the things that did come up today, and getting them worked out. We'll do a little bit more, some actual practice teaching. Oh, and I forgot, I have 2 tasks for you before we meet next. Are you all teaching in the classroom right now? Okay, Christina Clark is not. If you're not in a classroom, if you have the opportunity to get a friend on Zoom or in person, if you can, here are the 2 tasks. Observing your students and checking for their comprehension throughout class, like making that more intentionally a part of how you're pacing. So rather than, I have this language I need to introduce to them, it's more like, here's a word, how are they reacting? You know, like kind of shifting that a little bit, thinking about that. So you don't have to necessarily change anything, just starting to observe, seeing what your students pick up and understand. And then the second thing, thinking about how can you shift an activity so that it's more about communicating with the people in the room and less about practicing language or rehearsing. Like, how can you make there be a purpose why we need to use this right here, and not only someday maybe they'll need it. So I have a little guide sheet from my notes, and I'll send this to Ying afterwards. So this is my notes for today, and then yeah, and I have another kind of the pacing document. I'll share that next week, like how I do Chinese planning stuff.
Great, thank you. Would we have like a copy of like the PowerPoint of how you're going from? Yeah, great.
Yeah,
and
I can do that too.
Share it with all the coaches. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really fun working with you.
Yeah.
See you. I was just hoping.
Thank you.
Diane, I was just wondering if you could give us also maybe a copy of that paper you had with the different questions.
Oh, like
words, like imagine, impossible. Yeah.
I might be able to take a photo. I don't know if I have, like, it's not like a typed document. This is all handwritten. So
yeah, no, it's fine. Just a photo or something would be great. I kind of tried to make notes as we went, but it would be easier.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can do that. Yeah. See you.
See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was so nice to see all of you today.